U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Egypt on Tuesday to advance discussions on a potential ceasefire and hostage release deal for Gaza. Blinken is set to hold talks later this week, focusing on areas of possible progress despite significant unresolved disputes. More in this report.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with the president of Egypt on Tuesday as he continued to press for a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Blinken's meeting in Cairo followed talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a day earlier. Blinken said Netanyahu had accepted what the U.S. diplomat called a bridging proposal aimed at narrowing the gaps between the two sides after the talks last week paused without a breakthrough. U.S. officials have not spelled out how the current proposal differs from previous versions. Negotiations have so far failed to deliver an agreement since U.S. President Joe Biden in May outlined a potential ceasefire that would pause fighting in what is now a 10-month conflict, which would precipitate a return of Israeli captives held in Gaza and a possible withdrawal of Israeli forces from the war-ravaged enclave.
Israel accepts the bridging proposal. It's now incumbent on Hamas to do the same.
Blinken pressed Hamas now to similarly agree to the latest terms. But Osama Hamdan, a senior Hamas official who spoke to Reuters from an undisclosed location, said the Islamist group that governed Gaza didn't need new talks. It needed an implementation mechanism. Hamdan said the new proposal was, quote, not what was presented to us and not what we agreed on, and accused the U.S. administration of, quote, giving in to the Israeli pressures and not the opposite. Meanwhile, fighting rages on in tiny, crowded Gaza. Israel's military campaign has killed at least 40,000 people since October, according to Palestinian health authorities. The health ministry said 11 more, including women and children, died in Israeli strikes Tuesday in Khan Yunis. The war in Gaza began on October 7, 2023, when Hamas gunmen stormed into Israeli communities, killing around 1,200 people and abducting about 250 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. On Tuesday, Israel's military said it had recovered the bodies of 6 of its hostages from southern Gaza. The army said that 109 hostages remained in the Palestinian territory. Israel believed around a third of them to be already dead. Those deaths include Avraham Munder, an elderly Israeli seized from a kibbutz on October 7th.
My uncle was kidnapped from his house, from his home in kibbutz Nir Oz on that Saturday by Hamas terrorists. This happened October 7th. On October 8th, he was abandoned by his government. And on October 9th, he was abandoned by his government. And on October 10th, and this continuously went on until the day that he died.
His nephew, Zahiro Shahar Moore, told Reuters that his uncle was abandoned by an Israeli government that refused to make the concessions that would have brought Avraham home alive.
No one will want to live in a state that does not take care of its citizens, that betrays them and abandons them.
Blinken has called the latest push for a deal probably the best, possibly the last opportunity to bring hostages home and pause the fighting.